If you've ever felt helpless or like you don't have total control over the direction of your career or the progression of your career, you're going to learn how to make yourself bulletproof and how to be infinitely employable and keep yourself in a position where you can always have job security in an economy where no job is truly secure. Hello and welcome to The Rebase Show, the show for profession with purpose. I am your host, Sean P. Martin. If this is the first time that you're joining me, then this is the show you need to know. This is the show where we're going to equip you with everything that you need in order to create more success and more fulfillment in your career and in your life. And this episode is another one of our tactical takeaways episodes. And in this tactical episode, I'm going to review a previous episode that we had. In this particular case, it's going to be the episode that we had when I had a conversation with Katie Sagan, the VP of the People and Experience team over at VaynerMedia, just a few episodes back. And now this won't be a all-encompassing recap of our conversation, but I am going to go over my top 3 takeaways from my conversation with Katie and in hearing her story. And then those takeaways are not just going to be fluff. They're not just going to be nice to hear. They're not just going to be, for your benefit and to inspire you, but they're going to be really tactical things and things that you can actually take action on. And then once we actually get to the top takeaway, we're going to count down from 3 to 1. And once we get to the top takeaway from my conversation with Katie Sagan, then you're actually going to get an action item, something tactical, something that you can actually take action on now if you want to create this certainty and you want to create this security in your employment from here on out. And so I hope that's something that you're interested in and that you'll follow along and then you'll take action on that action item. And I got to tell you, it was really difficult to narrow the list of takeaways that I had from my conversation with Katie down to just 3 things. I mean, our conversation was amazing, and there were so many things that we could talk about, like the characteristics of finding or creating a really special company, a really special organization, and a special place to work. We could talk about how to make sure that you've got great access up and down the chain of command across the company. We could talk about what a boomerang employee is and why that's so valuable. We could talk about what to do whenever there are disagreements between you and your higher ups or between you and your direct reports. But we're going to dive in here in just a second into the top 3 takeaways that I had from my conversation with Katie. And I think you're really going to like what these 3 takeaways are going to teach you and how you can take action on them and actually improve the trajectory of your career and improve the conditions that you're working in right now. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started and dive into tactical takeaway number 3. So takeaway number 3 from my conversation with Katie Sagan is that creating an impact from your work, it can come in seemingly infinite different forms, and it's up to you how you view where that impact can come from. Katie initially thought she needed to work for nonprofits or government organizations or to basically be doing charity work in order to create an impact. But one of the things she realized over time, in addition to the fact that working for a company like VaynerMedia or working for a startup, like she had done previously, was that a lot of these companies have access to a ton of capital, to a ton of resources, and they have to a ton of talent. They have a lot of really talented people in these organizations, and that these companies with all this access to capital and that's where a lot of these resources and this wealth and things are concentrated, that they're not evil corporations, that they actually have the capacity and the will in many cases to really make a difference. And Katie also realized that impact doesn't have to come from her directly doing the work to benefit somebody who needs help. Being in an HR function and in that capacity, Katie realized very quickly how much she enjoyed being in this people and experience space and in that HR space, and that she didn't have to directly impact the person who might have needed help. She could be the person who's impacting somebody at the company one-on-one, somebody like a creative or like a marketing professional, somebody in that space who looks to HR and was looking to her to help them do their job better. And then by impacting that person, they are better able to do their job, which in the case of VaynerMedia, they are putting campaigns out and they're creating all these assets for these companies that are really trying to make a difference in a lot of different ways. And by her helping other people be their best selves and do their best work, then she was creating an impact that was even bigger because she's impacting somebody one-on-one who's then able to impact a large number of people. And so that can be part of your contribution, is that you don't maybe necessarily make the direct impact on the end person that you want to make the impact on, but you can impact the person who can help them. So I would challenge you to think about and challenge your own perceptions, your preconceptions, and your misconceptions of what impact really means to you and how you can actually create a difference and make a difference in other people's lives, and recognize that it doesn't have to be just the one or two ways that you were thinking it had to be in the past. And this will really help you be aware of any blind spots that you might have had around what impact is and what it has to mean to you. And it'll give you some new options and hopefully get your creativity going a little bit about all the different ways that you can actually make an impact. So my second takeaway from my conversation with Katie Sagan is this, and that's that you have way more control than you might realize when it comes to your career. And she talked a lot about asking yourself these questions around like, what are you doing with the opportunities that you're presented every day in the workplace, with the opportunity to raise your hand, to volunteer some input, to confidently ask questions or voice opinions or voice your concerns and to be heard. A lot of times it can feel safer to stay quiet, to blend in, to not rock the boat. And you have to ask yourself, if that's what you choose to do, if you have questions about something or you have concerns or you want to know more or you want some more context or you're curious about the reason decisions were made and you don't raise your hand and you don't speak up, ask yourself, will you potentially regret that later and regret not speaking up? And in addition to whether or not you're going to regret that, is it going to lead to talking behind people's backs, to back channeling, to gossiping, to building dissent and even subversion of the company mission and goals and projects and things like that? I have to say that for a number of reasons, I as a leader do not have a ton of patience for that back channeling, that gossiping, that quiet dissent, especially in a situation where I and other members of leadership and really just other members of the team in general are trying to create an environment where anybody can speak up. And so when somebody chooses not to, and then will go and voice their concerns or their complaints or their questions outside of, the transparent sort of team environment, really the reason that I don't have a ton of patience for that is not because it offends me personally. And it's not because, it offends my ego or anything like that. It's really because all that does is makes it harder to get the important work done. And it presents these roadblocks and it presents these challenges that didn't have to exist. We live in a world now where most of the work that any person, any human being is doing in an organization is not the kind of work that just goes smoothly and procedurally start to finish every time. That kind of work, the work that no problems ever arise, the work that is very procedural and repetitive and does not have a lot of variance or variation to it, that work is being automated. That work is being done by machines, by technology, because there's no need for people to do a lot of that work whenever there's no decision making, no creativity necessary, those sorts of things, which means that the kind of work that we are doing as people, as contributors in an organization, is going to be that kind of work where problems pop up, challenges arise. We have to make decisions. We have to get creative. And so that means that work is already going to come with some challenges. And I say this a lot when I'm working with companies and when I'm working with people, that one of my primary goals and primary directives as a leader is to make sure that we squash avoidable disruptions, avoidable waste, like waste of time, avoidable churn. And if there are things that we know could potentially get in the way, that we try to squash those and get rid of them early on. And this back channeling and this dissent and all these other things, these are avoidable distractions, avoidable disruptions. These are things that by creating a good environment, by making sure that everybody can have their voice heard, by making sure that we, call on people and that we press on people to raise their hand, that we can ideally avoid the drama, the waste, all of that from the back channeling and the gossiping and all those other things. So again, I would ask you, are you taking advantage of those opportunities to have your voice heard? There was a movie that I absolutely loved growing up called My Fellow Americans. It was released back in the mid to late 90s. I was probably 14 or 15 at the time whenever I watched this movie. And it was a comedy, and there were a couple former presidents, who went on this, comedic adventure. And you ever have those random lines in movies that stick with you for a really long time, and random phrases, random sayings that stick with you? Well, in that movie, one of the lines that really stuck with me that I still use to this day is one of the two presidents, they're talking to each other, and one of them says, "Yeah, you know what really gives me the red ass?" And the other one looks at him and says, "Gives you the red ass?" And obviously he just meant, do you know what really irritates me? But I gotta say that when we live in a time where we are automating and using technology to streamline the things that are repetitive and easy to do, and leaving ourselves mostly with the things that vary, the things that require a human touch, the things that require decision making and creativity, that's enough of a challenge. And the thing that really gives me the red ass is when we don't tackle these avoidable problems ahead of time, and when people will introduce challenges through their actions that could have been avoided or prevented in the first place. And so if you are the kind of person who you have not been raising your hand and speaking up as much, and you haven't been voicing your concerns and voicing your questions, and maybe if you don't feel as comfortable raising your hand, maybe you don't feel like you're in the right environment for it, or you just aren't as confident in doing that, I want to give you a few easy tricks that you can do so you can speak up when maybe you're not as comfortable doing so. If you already know, for example, some of the things that you might say, or some of the objections that you might have, or some of the questions that you might ask, and you know these things ahead of time, ahead of being in a meeting situation, whether that's a day ahead of time or a couple hours or whatnot, if you know what the things are that you would speak up about if you had that confidence, then just practice them ahead of time. Practice asking them, practice raising that concern. And you can do this mentally, quietly, or you could do it aloud in the car on your way to work. You could do it, in the restroom in the morning or in the shower or whatever, but practice them ahead of time so you can get the wording right and make sure that, you're being clear and direct. And this can really help you. And I know that may sound a little silly, and you may worry about feeling a little silly and self-conscious by practicing and rehearsing ahead of time. And I guess I'd ask you, would you rather feel silly for a moment, or would you rather feel over the longer term like you have zero control or zero influence over what it is you're working on, or feel like you have zero say in the nature of the things that you're working on or how you're going to work on certain things? So would you rather feel silly for a moment, or would you rather dread that feeling, that lack of input and that lack of control? so many people in so many different disciplines actually spend a ton of time rehearsing things. If you're a little quieter or shy, maybe a little more introverted, maybe you're not as comfortable speaking up in a group setting, you might be thinking that that's just you as an introvert and that, other people don't deal with that and they don't have to rehearse things. But salespeople, for example, rehearse their sales pitch. They rehearse the script. They rehearse dealing with objections. They rehearse all of these things a lot. And that's just so that they can speak to customers, right? So this is basically practice and developing a skill. And so there's nothing wrong with rehearsing the objections you have, the questions you have, those sorts of things. Absolutely nothing wrong. And everybody who needs to present their ideas and sell their ideas, right? And that's what bringing up an objection or bringing up a question really is trying to sell your idea to the group. And everybody who does this on a regular basis spends some time rehearsing in some way. And I would add that as you're rehearsing these things in your mind, or you're rehearsing them, out loud, reflect on the tone that you're using. Does the tone that you're using to ask a question, does that tone sound curious or does it sound judgmental? I find it's pretty easy to determine if you can actually hear this in your head or when you're saying it out loud. And really, honestly, you can feel this. If you ask, for example, let's say you get asked to perform a task and you want to raise your hand and speak up because you're asked to perform a task and you're asked to get it done within the next week. And you know that in the past, performing this task has taken longer than that. And you could raise your hand and you could say, or you could ask, do we really think that this is likely to get done in a week? It's taken longer than that before. And I want you to hear just two different ways that I can say the exact same words and they sound and come off a lot differently. And so the first way is the judgmental way. And you raise your hand and you could say, do we really think that's going to take a week to get done? I mean, in the past, it's taken way longer, right? And the alternative way, just one alternative way, is to ask it in a genuinely curious manner. Because what's your intent here? Is your intent to, cause a problem, or is your intent to drive open conversation? And so the curious way could be, hey, do we really think this is only going to take a week? I mean, we have done this in the past and I feel like it's taken longer. And do we really think just a week? And so if you hear the difference in inflection, like, do we really think this is going to take a week? Like, it's always taken longer versus, do we really think this is only going to take a week? It's taken longer in the past, right? So you hear and you can feel, I can feel it as I'm saying that, and as I'm saying that in two different ways, how you can actually be genuinely curious and bring up a concern, bring up a question, things like that, to where it's going to keep the conversation open. And the last thing you can do, the last trick that you can use, if you want to raise your hand, if you want to speak up, if you want to offer your input more often, is that you can actually cheat a little bit and you can preface your statements with what we'll call qualifying expressions. And that will help to keep the discussion open to possibilities. And so what's a qualifying expression? Well, here's one example. In the example we just gave of raising your hand and saying, do we really think it's going to take a week? I feel like in the past, it's taken longer. You could say, hey, I may be off base here, but do we really think that this is just going to take a week? Because I feel like in the past it's taken longer. Or do we really feel like this is going to take a week? I might be misremembering, but I feel like in the past it's taken longer. Or I could be wrong, but, or maybe I'm off base here, right? And those are qualifying statements that you are admitting that you may not have all the information, so let's continue to discuss, as opposed to asking a question that sounds like more like you're stating a fact, right? Like, do we really think this is going to take a week? In the past, I feel like it's taken longer. It sounds like you're very certain of yourself. But by using that qualifying statement, you're keeping everything open for discussion. And I do want to caution that you don't want to overdo this. And you don't want to constantly use qualifying statements because it can basically erode or challenge your confidence and the appearance that you're confident in what you're saying over time if you do it way, way too much. But if speaking up feels risky or scary to you, then this is just a great little tool, and it'll help you to be able to speak up without putting too much on the line. It's almost kind of like training wheels on a bike or those gutter bumpers in, a bowling alley. They're just there that you can use for a little while until you feel comfortable without them. And the goal here really is for you to feel like you have more input, like you have more say, and like you're in more control of what's going on in an organization, and that you can provide that input and help to grow your involvement, help to grow your skills, help to grow your career, really. Because at the end of the day, the problems usually arise most often when people feel like they're out of control, or they don't have control over what's going on in their job, in a particular project, in their career trajectory. It's when you don't feel like you have any influence or any control that the problems start to arise. Takeaway number one, my top takeaway from my conversation with Katie Sagan, is that basically there are two rules for really taking ownership of your career direction, your career progression, and of your professional success. And we're going to go over those two rules really quick, and then I'm going to give you a pretty simple and straightforward action item and an exercise that you can grab, take a hold of, put it into action, and start to make progress to take ownership of your career direction, progression, and your professional success. And like I said, there are two rules. And rule number one is that you are always going to be your own best advocate. So you have to get good at being the best advocate for yourself that you can possibly be. For example, if you're advocating to advance up inside of an organization, if you are looking for a raise or a promotion or a new opportunity, you have to be asking yourself that when you're approaching advocating for yourself and advocating for the things that you want, are you more focused on communicating your wants, like higher pay, a new title, a better position, new responsibilities? Or are you more focused on how this new position, this increase in salary, are you focused on how this will benefit the organization or how it'll benefit your manager or leader? And I've shared the story in the past of an employee coming and requesting a raise, almost demanding an increase in pay. And when asked why, like, what's the justification? Because that's a perfectly logical thing for the company who's paying you to ask, justify the increase in pay and the increase in expenditure from the company. And their answer was, well, I want to buy a house. Well, while I respect that and I understand that, that's not a reason for the company to pay you more and essentially say that it's valuing you more and valuing your contribution more. And that's an example of just focusing on your wants, not on why this is an even trade or why this is beneficial, not just to you, but also to the company. And the other thing to do whenever you're advocating for yourself inside of an organization is to make sure that you're not being overly demanding and you're not trying to catch people off guard. You're not making this a hugely stressful thing for everybody, and making sure that you're doing it, again, not in a demanding way, but in a collaborative way, not doing it in a combative way, not doing it where you're just dropping this in somebody's lap and then saying that you need an answer. It's being patient and it's being collaborative. One thing I have to admit, I still have not gotten used to as a leader, and something that I don't always handle with poise and style exactly, is when I'm caught off guard with some request or, in some cases, some demand. And if I'm caught off guard with something that is going to instantly add some additional things to my plate or put a lot more things on my mind, then for sure I'm not going to handle that super well, because as a leader and as a manager, and I'm not looking for anybody's sympathy here, but managers executives, leaders in an organization are usually juggling a million things on their mind too. And that means that your particular request or your desire for something is not going to be the only thing on their mind. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask for it. It just means you should take that into consideration, because if you're going to add to the list of things they're thinking about, they're more likely to be in tune with you, and they're more likely to give you what it is that you want if you're making it easier on them and you're not just dumping something on their plate and saying, I'd like a raise or a promotion and I need to know by tomorrow because I've got this competing offer, right? So make sure that you are being collaborative. Make sure that you're doing things in the right way. And so that's rule number one, is to be your best advocate, because you're going to be your strongest advocate. So you just need to get good at advocating for yourself and for your interests. Rule number two, maybe even more important, is that you can't do this on your own. Advancing your career, making sure that you have really good employability, that you are, rock solid and bulletproof on your job security, really requires you to have a good reputation. It requires you to build that reputation. It requires you to build a verifiable track record of your ability to deliver value. And so you need to start building your own sort of unofficial advocacy group inside of your organization, wherever you're currently working, as well as starting to build a bit of a group outside of that organization. Is that way, really the true way to make sure that you are, infinitely employable and that you have true sort of job security, is to know that even if something happens and you can no longer hold the position that you're currently in, or have a position in the company that you're currently in, that there are options elsewhere. And so you're going to be creating these connections, real authentic connection, that's going to guarantee that you'll always be highly employable and highly valuable. And so that is your tactical action item, and the thing that I'm going to challenge you to take action on, if and only if you actually want to make your job security and your employability truly bulletproof. And if you want to make that a priority so that you never have to worry about your ability to, find a gig, to get paid for the value that you provide. And you're going to start off by doing that by just writing down the names of 3 to 5 people maybe in your current company, in your organization. And these can be direct teammates. It could be your current manager. It could be another leader. It could be another manager. It could be somebody in another department that maybe is sort of on the same level as you, or the same tier in the organization. Again, it could be any of these kind of people, but people that will vouch for you and go to bat for you on anything like your work ethic, on your ability to collaborate and communicate, whatever it is. And you're going to go to these people and you're going to basically tell them flat out. You're going to be completely transparent and honest and authentic with them. And you can say, I really enjoy working with you. I enjoy XYZ about what it is that you do here and how you do it. And I want to make sure that I can show up and do my best work here, and that I can advance and that I can continue to grow. And I would love it if you'd be willing to provide feedback to me and to my manager, whenever the time comes. You don't have to do it now or all the time, but, I would just really like that help from you. And I'd really appreciate that help from you because I respect you. And in almost every time, people are going to be totally willing to do that for you. And then, like I said, you're going to do this outside of your current coworkers, outside of your current company as well, just so that you've got your bases covered. And also because you're going to find this is a really super easy way to quote unquote network. And honestly, the way that networking has really transformed over the last few years, where it's not a transactional thing where everybody you talk to, you're figuring out what you can get from them, but more of community building and relationship building over time. And I'm going to make this part super, super easy on you, because you're going to start with just one person. You're going to identify one person outside of your current organization, maybe someone you worked with or worked for in the past that you had a good relationship or a mutual respect for. And you're going to reach out to them. Use LinkedIn, email, whatever. You're going to reach out to them and you just wanted to check in and see how they're doing. Say that you really enjoyed working with them and talking with them in the past, and that you really respect their, their work ethic, their ability to deliver results, their creativity, their management style, whatever it is you truly respect about them. Just say, I really enjoyed working with you and I really respect this thing. And that I want to be more involved outside the scope of my current work and, my current company. And I want to be more involved in helping other people get what they want wherever it is that I can help them. And then here's a really important point. You're going to give first. You're going to lead with giving to them. You're going to let them know, say, hey, if you're ever looking for a change, or you need a recommendation for something, or a referral, or you need me to refer somebody to you because you're hiring somebody, or whatever it is that you need, if you think I can help you, you can reach out. And then through that conversation, if it seems like they're open to accepting your hypothetical future offer, then just ask, would you be willing to do the same for me? In most cases, everybody's going to agree to that. And now you've not come in asking for something. You're basically just creating and nurturing that relationship so that if the time comes, you got somebody you can now reach out to. And then the beauty in this, and the thing that's going to make it so easy to then grow that network, is that you've only reached out to one person outside your organization, but you're going to ask them, you're going to first say, I'm just getting started at this. And you're the first person I actually connected with in this and trying to, make sure we can help each other out. But then ask, who's one or two other people that you can think of that I should reach out to? And if they mention people that you don't know, maybe they'll mention other people you've worked with in the past or something like that. But if they mention someone who you don't actually know, then ask them if they'd be willing to do a double opt-in introduction, which all a double opt-in introduction is basically they get permission from you and permission from the other person to make an intro. And now you've been introduced to a new person, and you can basically follow this whole process over again and say, this person that introduced us really seems to like and respect you, and, everything else. And then you can repeat that same process with the new people that you're getting introduced to. And then it can just keep building upon itself. And now you're building out this network. And the beauty of this is you don't have to be great friends with all these people. You just have to occasionally stay connected. And so that is my top 3 tactical takeaways from my conversation with Katie Sagan on building a career advocacy group, taking control over the direction of your career, and really making sure that you are being creative and thinking about the impact that it is that you can have, and realizing that it can kind of come from anywhere. And so with this in mind, and knowing your action item, and knowing that takeaway number 1 is all about you advocating and taking control of your own career growth, I got to say in closing that no matter what the next step in your career looks like, no matter what it is, all too often, too many people feel like they have to start over from scratch when they're looking for a new job, or when they're looking for a new opportunity, or they want to go in a different direction. And whether they realize they're doing it or not, they are completely starting over from scratch, which is honestly difficult, scary, and most importantly, it's unnecessary. And instead, if you put in just a little bit of effort, which that's all that exercise is, that action item that I gave you, it's just a little bit of effort. If you just do that, then you're never truly starting over from scratch, because you're always going to have this community of people to support you. And so with that, I'm going to leave you to go execute on that action item. And until next time, for the Rebase Show, the show for Profession with Purpose, I'm Sean, signing off. Cheers. Hey, it's Sean again. I know you thought that was the end of the episode, but just when you thought you were out, we pulled you back in. Just for a minute though, with a few final reminders as we wrap up our time today. First, if you haven't already subscribed, what are you waiting for? By subscribing to the show, you'll get access to every amazing conversation and solo episode in the archives. Everything from the future of work to going into the business of you, to dealing with stress when you're feeling overwhelmed, and you'll automatically get every new episode right when it gets released. And I don't need to tell you how to do this because you're a podcast listener and you're listening to this show, so you're obviously awesome. Now, if you are enjoying the show, then all I want for Christmas is your 5-star rating and review. And I've made it even easier for you to do so. Just tap the link in the show notes or go to ratethispodcast.com/rebase. Now, every new rating and review makes me feel like the popular girl in school. But more importantly, the podcasts with great reviews are the ones that get featured on podcast platforms. So more people will discover the show and we can continue to grow this movement of profession with purpose. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this episode, and if you're not driving right now or flying a helicopter or performing life or death surgery, then please screenshot the episode and tag me on Instagram at RebaseHQ. Doing just one of these things will absolutely make my day. If you do all three, well, let's just say I'll owe you a huge hug and a high five the next time I see you. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you who's tuning into the show every week and who's joined the Profession with Purpose movement. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.